Hello, my fellow people of the plant. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast, your favorite podcast that includes industry-facing conversations with the industry's leading experts that aim to educate and inform the public regarding the plant's endless benefits. My guest today is Jax Finkel. She's the executive director at Texas NORML. Jax Finkel, how are you?
Hello, good. How are you?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for making time for me and the audience today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So before we started recording, it sounds like you got a little bit of a break now that the 87th Texas legislative session has ended, and there was a lot of activity and busyness around, cannabis specifically and hemp. So yeah, how are you doing now that you've come out of the session, and how are you feeling at this point?
Well, the break was not a long one, and that's okay. But yes, definitely a little bit of downtime now that the session's over, but still looking forward to what lessons did we learn, doing some, documentation so we're better prepared for next time. And then also preparing for all the upcoming things that we have. We've got redistricting special sessions, we've got voter guides to make, we've got events. So just continuing to plan, just in a lower gear. We're just like in a lower gear in June, not full blast.
Right. Well, the work never ends, especially when it comes to hemp and cannabis in Texas specifically. And, we, as a resident of Texas, I want to say appreciate all the work that you and Texas NORML does, along with all the other advocacy groups out there. And so with that, Jax, let's just kick it off and allow the audience to get to know you and your background. So really, what is your background and what made you so passionate about cannabis and hemp advocacy in the state of Texas?
Sure. Well, I'm a native Texan. I was born in Houston and I've lived in Austin for many, many years. And in 2005, here in Austin, I was at a political meeting and I met the former executive director of Texas NORML. His name was Josh Schimberg and his wife. They were at this political meetup and they were talking about what Texas NORML did. And I was like, oh, I can get behind this. Okay. And so I ended up volunteering with them, and I saw some opportunities and some gaps that I could fill, so I became the volunteer coordinator and made sure that we had reliable people to keep all of the things that we're doing going, because it's totally volunteer run at that point. And then, I went from volunteer coordinator to political and legislative director. And so I would manage our lobby days and our political strategy and our legislative strategy. And then I eventually became deputy director, followed by executive director. And the way it happened with the executive director was during the 2015 legislative session, I was deputy director. I worked in real estate at the time. I had a little kid, so I'm like working full time, being a mom. And also the legislative session was intense. So I was also working, like 30, 40 hours a week on trying to change the laws. And when I say working, I mean volunteering. And it was too much. When we realized that we couldn't keep doing that we had to have someone that was working on cannabis all the time, because it's, as we'll get into it, it's not just about the legislative session. That's only 140 days of our 2-year cycle. And so I took a leap of faith, moving from the real estate world to becoming the first staff for Texas NORML back in 2015, and came on as executive director in that manner, and just continuing to grow the organization over the years. 2015 is when we got our medical program. 2019, we were able to expand it and get a hemp program as well. We'll go over what happened in the 2021 session. But after 2017, we realized that there was a lot of rural Texans that kind of didn't really understand cannabis and didn't understand like the legislative process and stuff like that. And we also understood that there were people that didn't really want like cannabis or marijuana on their bank statements. And while Texas NORML is a 501c4, that means that we can, do all the lobbying we want, not tax deductible, right? Mm-hmm. So we created this 501c3 nonprofit that focused on rural education, Foundation for an Informed Texas. So those are the two organizations that I work with, so that we can get, the advocacy done through one channel and make sure that we're getting really great education through the other channel, if you will. And so then that brings us up to today. Just finished the 2021 legislative session, and in all the years I've been up at the Capitol for sessions, this was one of the most hectic ones that I have experienced. And then throw in all of the bizarreness of the pandemic and the way that kind of kept things very separated. It was just a very interesting experience.
Right. Well, I mean, let's jump right into that. That was a great, summary and recap of kind of where you started. 2005. I mean, you're super. You've been in it for a while. Your legacy. I mean, even before states went adult use in the country, which I think was 2012, Colorado being the first, or 2014. So you were way ahead of even that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was I've never been called legacy before, but I'll take it.
And I'm not talking about your age either, so don't take it that way,
It's okay. When I say it to myself, sometimes I'm like, dang, it's been a long time. But I've met so many great people along the way, and I've learned more and more about the plant, and I think that just kind of made me want to work on it more.
Right.
It took it from being like, oh, that's cool, I like that, to like, oh, there's a lot of really deep issues that come into play with this topic. So it's rewarding in a very interesting way.
Sure. And to that point, like, that's where I would imagine when Texas NORML decided to make the decision of, staffing people to be full-time in this effort, because to your point, like, if you're not so familiar or so knowledgeable about the plant and the benefits, the efficacy, the racial injustice, everything that's kind of, falls under it, you kind of have to continually educate so that you move the needle. Because if not, as we've seen in Texas and other states, it's not considered a top priority for many of these policymakers. But then once they understand the benefits and the opportunities that come with the plant, it's a whole different conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. And the attitudes have changed a lot. One of my first legislative visits, I accompanied a veteran to go visit our senator, and the staffer was pretty insensitive and basically like told that veteran that he just wanted to get high. And I kind of was like, don't murder the nice staffer, please. Please don't murder. But we've come a long way. We've come a long way to now, there are issues with our program, our medical program, for sure, that need to be corrected. But over the years, I've known a lot of patients who haven't made it to see this point that would have qualified under this program, and it would have been very important to them. So while I continue to work for those that are not included, I am proud of what we've been able to do, because as you said, it's not a top priority for everyone. And this session, we were up against the pandemic, budgetary shortfalls, the ERCOT situation, the winter storms, redistricting, right? So I was looking at that session like, y'all, this is going to be real hard to make the point, for cannabis laws to be changed. And so whenever we got more bills from the House to the Senate than ever before, whenever we were able to do some of these things that are historic, even though, maybe we didn't have as much change as we wanted, we'll get into that. I was surprised. I was surprised. And, I do also have to say that it took sheer willpower of the people of Texas, listening to leadership in the cannabis community who was talking with legislators and up there and working the strategy, and us trusting each other, that really, like, we were trying to do the right thing. And the people of Texas, when we were like, y'all need to call, they called, and they like didn't stop until we were like, okay, good job, we did it next. Okay. And I was really proud of that. I was really proud of how, this could have been a season of distrust and contempt for each other, because we weren't together like we always are. We weren't, being able to work so closely. So I was just like so relieved and happy. And I was also very glad that we were able to keep, hemp farmers and hemp retailers from, having too much conflict over the Delta 8. We were really able to kind of like take that messaging and talk about how, prohibition based on a chemical component of a plant is ineffective and costly. And we all know this. So regulation, not prohibition, is the avenue to take. So there was lots of opportunities for landmines everywhere, but we managed to pull through. And drag that medical bill across the finish line, because everything was against us on that medical bill for it to pass. And we didn't give up. I mean, until the last moment, as you know, Kevin, we were working to get that bill, and it passed at like the 11th hour. Right. And the governor signed it. So, oh my goodness, what a relief for all of the people with PTSD and cancer in Texas. You know, I'm just like, oh, okay, sorry, all you chronic pain patients, we're not forgetting you. We're working hard on the interim. We're coming back. We're asking for things, but it was a relief.
Right. And, you know, I just got to say, I totally agree with you. And you should be proud of what you saw with the people of Texas coming together, the cannabis community in Texas, because I saw it also. I mean, you know, this podcast, we talk about a lot of different states and other, you know, not just Texas, but I'm following what's happening in Texas, and I attend, you know, events where I can. And you could just see the camaraderie, the collaboration, the willingness to just kind of listen to each other. And that's important, right? When you're trying to invoke change and overturn policies, because that communication needs to be streamlined on both sides. And it's great that how you talked about initially, how, you know, while you're really focused on the advocacy side and at the Capitol in Austin and you know, making change there, you also want to educate the farmer, right? And make sure that side isn't being left out, and making sure that the farmer's protected, because everybody needs to work together to move the needle and make this work.
Absolutely. And, you know, TDA was under sunset this session as well, which I should add. For those of your viewers that are not familiar, sunset is where agencies are evaluated. Oh, shoot, I can't remember if it's every 7 or 12 years. But in a regular interim, they're evaluated by the legislature, and they either grow them or reduce them or abolish them, or keep them as they are. But they basically deeply evaluate that agency. And so TDA was under that evaluation this time around. And so that, on top of trying to get the hemp perfecting bills, I'm sure was a lot for them. And wow, did the hemp bill get rowdy? Did it not, this session, with all of the drama that was going on? And then that hemp drama kind of spilled all over criminal justice, unfortunately, and caused some real issues.
Yeah. Well, let's dive into to these different, you know, the hecticness of the 87th legislative session in Texas, and the specific bills that were actually passed and signed by Governor Abbott. So I guess let's start with, you know, the win that we talked about, the you know, expanding the medical program. I believe that was bill, what, HB 3948?
No, that was HB 1535 by Chairwoman Click. She has basically been the author of everything that happens with this program since the beginning. And she tends to be very narrow and targeted in her bill, and tries to just do what she thinks she can get passed. I'd like to see us negotiate with a little bit extra, so that when we lose things, we're not losing critical things. Right. But, you know, she is the author, and because of how our legislative cycle works, that's what we get. Because here in Texas, before we go further, to clarify for people who may not know, we do not have ballot initiative in Texas where Texans can collect signatures and get something on the ballot. That's not something that we can do here. We have to go through the legislator. And so that's our state representatives and our state senators. And so through engagement through constituents and voting and et cetera, that's how we get them to author these bills and then shepherd it through the process. And since Chairwoman Click is a nurse, many people defer to her on these things. So she authored the bill. There were quite a few bills that had to do with medical cannabis, of varying degrees of wonderfulness to less wonderful. And unfortunately, only her bill was allowed a hearing. She is the chair of public health in the House. And so she said, "'Tis my bill, and we shall have a hearing." And we said, "Oh, okay, 'tis your bill. So this is the one vehicle. Got it." And she also chose, because it just so happened that the medical hearing was on the same day as some abortion bill hearings that were happening, and they were all in her committee. So it's very common for chairs to limit the time that a witness can testify, you know, from like 3 minutes to 2 minutes to 1 minute. Like that's very common. I have never seen a chair say, "Also, I can stop testimony at any time."
Wow.
So that was the first time that I had seen that. And I mean, chairs have this discretion, and she used I will say she didn't just use it on cannabis. She used it on abortion. And I think she may have used it in another couple of hearings too. But when she laid it out, her reasoning was like, this is public health, and public health also means a good night's sleep. And I'm not going to be here all dang night. Okay. Like, I'm paraphrasing her, of course.
Right.
But
as an elected official, it must be nice, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I get her point. Having hours, and I was at the Capitol for 30 hours at one point at this session. So that's not, at the end of 30 hours, you are not thinking straight. That is not healthy. So like, I get her point, but also maybe let's reevaluate how late we start work on this, but whatever.
Right.
So we had the hearing. I don't know exactly how many people were signed up to testify, but only a handful did. There was about an hour of testimony. We all knew that bill was going to pass. It was her bill. It was going to pass. And whenever it passed out of the House and went to the Senate, it was assigned to committee, but it just kind of sat there for weeks. So we really had to like push to get that hearing. And I mean, we got that hearing at the 11th hour to have a hearing, and they like called it from the floor, like went back, had the hearing immediately, no testimony, passed it, but they passed it amended. So as authored, the bill would have added all forms of cancer, PTSD, and chronic pain. It would have changed it from 0.5% THC to 5% THC. It would have had an administrative process where doctors could petition DSHS, the Department of State Health Services, to add conditions during the interim so that patients don't have to wait that 2 years. Mm-hmm. And it also had a research component that would allow for IRBs to work with licensed dispensaries here in Texas. But the way that it passed out of the Senate was all forms of cancer, PTSD, 1% THC, and the research. So we lost chronic pain. We lost that integral let doctors practice medicine and try to help their patients aspect. I mean, Can we talk about how many people in the legislature are doctors or medical professionals? It's like 6 out of 183 people.
Right.
So like, I don't understand why y'all are making the decisions instead of doctors, but okay. Right. So it already a narrow bill was cut even more, right? And so that was very disappointing. We really tried to get some things added back on the floor. Unfortunately, it didn't. They went to conference committee, because if the bill passes and it's different in both chambers, they go to conference committee, and then they have to, both chambers have to approve that report. And because time was so short, Representative Click was like, I accept what y'all have sent me, and accepted it, and fortunately made it on the deadline. But I mean, we were told for weeks that bill was dead and that it wasn't going to pass. And we were like, not today, Satan. We're going to do it.
Right. And that shows, I mean, the people just kind of banded together, saw that was stalled, and moved it forward. Now, let me ask you this. When there were amendments to the bill and changes, like you mentioned, like how much of a lead time and heads up do y'all get? Like, I mean, is it just like, oh, by the way, we made these changes, here it is, and then now you have, like you said, you had to try to get it back on the House floor to add things back in? Like,
well, we know what the deadlines are, and we work with the offices. Chairman or Senator Schwartner is my personal senator, and so I have a relationship with his office. And so we knew that there were changes that were going to be made, and it wasn't necessarily because the senator wanted to see them made. He is actually a medical professional, mm-hmm. and he understands the issue. He's come a long way in understanding the issue, and that was really all he could get past the lieutenant governor. The person who is requiring these changes, it's not the governor, it's the lieutenant governor. The governor would have signed a much more comprehensive bill 2 cycles ago, but the lieutenant governor refused to let it pass out of his chamber. Wow. So, I thank Senator Schwartner for doing the work that he could do to make sure it had a hearing, because I know he spent a lot of political clout just to get that hearing. Mm-hmm. And probably all that political clout he got from working on some of the lieutenant governor's, priorities. So it's a delicate dance, and something, excuse me, sorry, I was going to mention earlier is, over all the years, there's been lobbyists at the Capitol for like businesses that have a bunch of money, but there's not a bunch of lobbyists at the Capitol working for the people. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's one important thing that I bring to the table is like, I don't have a company that's making money off of this. Like, this is consumer patient advocacy. This is compassion. This is doing the right thing. And I think that it's always important to have people like that at the table. And so I make sure that I'm going out and having these meetings all over the state to understand people's issues and concerns. And, you know, and that way, even if when we're having the conversations, those people are not literally sitting at the table, they figuratively have a seat at the table. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah.
And so I think it's important that we really make sure that business and advocacy, patient and consumer advocacy, can work very well hand in hand. And I think that we've seen that. Like, nobody wants businesses to fail. People want jobs. People want good businesses. But we also need to make sure that we're looking out for the consumer and the patient, and people who have best business practices are going to rise to the top. So there's my tangent on that.
No, I appreciate it. No, that's very helpful to understand. And again, like, you know, it's unfortunate that such a narrow bill was even cut more narrow, but it's a win, right? Because
Yeah.
like you mentioned, like, the patients that need this medicine will now get it. And come 2 years from now, you know, hopefully we can add more different ailments and conditions, you know, that fall under the medical program.
And ultimately, I mean, to me, the most Texas talking point you can get is medical freedom. Let patients and doctors decide what works for them. Let doctors decide dosing. Let doctors decide, you know, the conditions. And I did want to highlight, you know, there is some mischaracterization about what the THC percentage change does. And I have heard multiple outlets saying that it doubles the access to THC. Negative. That is not what happened. As it is right now, doctors can prescribe high doses of THC. It just means that in order to get that level of THC, you're consuming much more carrier, whether that be carrier oil or the gelatin mix of your gummy. You can take 250 milligrams a day of THC. You just might also be taking a cup of oil, which then gives you IBS-like side effects for some people when they're taking that much oil. And so the percentage in the THC actually has nothing to do with how much THC you can be prescribed. It has to do with how much THC can be in a bottle of product. So an example, there's a gentleman that right now, to get however much THC he needs, he's having to take 11 eyedroppers of medicine a day. If we had changed it from the 0.5 to the 5%, he would have had to take 2.
So you're saying all the added ingredients that are made for that specific dosage, like, you're having to take in all of those extra ingredients to remain compliant with the current potency THC levels that Texas passed during the legislative session.
Right. So it doesn't have to do with the milligrams you are prescribed. It has to do with all of the carrier oil that comes with ingesting that, right? And so that's why 5% was so important, because the only real side effects people are having are those IBS-like side effects from the carrier oil. It's not from the THC, okay?
Right.
And so, you know, the licensees have had to try to become pretty creative to get around that. 1% will help, and that will reduce the carrier oil, but it does not increase THC access. So I just want to make that really clear to everybody. You know, if you need a high dose of THC to help with your, you know, hypervigilance with your PTSD, you can be prescribed that. But until we can help legislators understand that better, it means you're going to take some carrier oil on the side. Now they're coming up with more edibles and lozenges and sprays, and they've got now, like, I think Compassionate Cultivation has a THC only product now, and they changed their name to Good Blend Texas, has like a CBN product to help with sleeping. So we're getting there. People have been under the misassumption that our medical program is only an oil program. It's not. That's just what legislators were comfortable with in the beginning. So that's all that the companies really did, because they wanted to show we'll be compliant, we'll be safe, this is a good program, look, trust us, expand it. And so now they're able to have some more products and some more variety. So it did not double THC, it just halved the carrier oil you have to take.
Got you. That is an important point of clarification. Thank you for sharing that, because I was a bit confused when I saw the percentages, and so
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, whenever you take, like, let's say Valium, you don't take 5% Valium. No, you don't. You take 5 milligrams of Valium.
Right.
Now, if you're making a tea with valerian root, which is the plant that Valium was based off of, I don't know if you know that, valerian root, you could, now that you're talking about like an agricultural, like a dried weight, you could test that and say, oh, it does have 5% valerian root in here. So when I use it, I'll use this. It's different math that you do with an agricultural product versus a pharmaceutical dosage, right? Like percentage of THC is fine for like hemp and in general in the recreational market if you want to understand what you're getting. But if you're trying to take like an exact dose, we need milligrams.
Right. Which is what they'd use in the pharmaceutical industry, right?
Yeah. Right. And it makes it more standardized for doctors. So that's good.
Right. Absolutely. Well, so let's talk about another bill that I know passed, which was HB 2593, THC concentrates. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
That did not get signed by the governor. So the other bill that passed, the other bill that passed was the patient protections. 567, 60 different bill numbers to remember. I think it's 567. Is that right?
Yes, you're right. Parental protections. Yes.
Yeah. So that just codified that CPS cannot harass patients whose children are enrolled in the Texas Compassionate Use Program. And that's really important. There are more patient protections we would like to see enacted, but man, getting CPS off of their backs is a really important one. So those are the two bills that actually passed and will become law. Now, 2593, which you're talking about, Representative, or as I like to refer to him, Speaker Pro Tem Joe Moody, give him all that pomp and circumstance. He earned it. That would have taken 2 ounces of concentrates, which is currently any amount of concentrates in Texas is a first-degree state jail felony if it has more than 0.3% THC in it. And it would have changed it from that first-degree state jail felony down to a Class B misdemeanor. Basically, it's what's called right sizing. Back in the 90s, you know, it was like cocaine is X, but now crack, because of these additives and dilutants, we're going to make it a harsher penalty. And so it's basically making flour and concentrates on the same level.
Got you.
And passed out of the House, no problem. Had a little bit of issue getting it into a hearing, but we really pushed for that. DAs, conservative DAs came and testified in support of the bill. The bill passed out of committee in the Senate. It went to the Senate floor to be approved. And because of the Delta 8 drama going on in the hemp bill, the lieutenant governor really wanted to make sure that Delta 8 was banned no matter what. And this was apparently what he thought his vehicle would be. And so he like paused the floor of the Senate for 15 minutes to have Senator Perry rush down from his education hearing to add an amendment that was not germane. What germane mean is it means like it has to do with the bill itself, and the bill has to do with marijuana concentrates. So in our statute, we have hemp, cannabis, sativa L at 0.3%. We have illicit marijuana. In Texas, we spell it with an H because racism, and that is one of the statutory avenues that we have. And then we have cannabis, medical cannabis, low THC cannabis, that's the medical program. So we're talking about, you know, marijuana concentrates, and they're trying to take an agricultural definition and add it into a criminal code. And so that's not germane. But Lieutenant Governor didn't care. Get that in there. And then so when it comes back to the House, because it's different, Moody was like, no, we'll go to conference committee to rectify it. So they went to conference committee, and I want to also be really clear here. Moody didn't take it to conference committee to like save Delta 8. There was a point of order on the bill, and a point of order had to do with its germaneness, which I just explained. A point of order can kill a bill. So you have to fix that. You can't, you have to fix the point of order. So he was going in to fix the point of order. Now, if it helps Delta 8, cool. But I just want to be clear that was not like the mission was
that wasn't his intention. Right.
The mission was to save the damn bill.
Which was super important in itself, right? Yeah.
And so in conference committee, they removed it. The House adopted the conference report and sent it over to the Senate. The Senate had the opportunity to adopt it, but the lieutenant governor refused to acknowledge Senator Johnson, and so it died.
Wow.
So we passed both chambers. We passed the conference report, but the lieutenant governor was like, I'm salty.
Delta 8, no. Let me add this in there and try to ban it for good.
Yep.
And then it killed the whole bill.
Yep. So that was very frustrating. But for that being the first time that that bill was entered in as legislation, and for it going like almost all the way, that's
Right.
amazing. Because usually bills, it takes 3 cycles for them to really like take hold enough to like pass. So that was a big deal.
Yeah, and you said that there were some even 6 district attorneys that were conservative that backed the bill also. So I mean,
not 6, but there was several different district attorneys that were there. I think what you're thinking of is that 6 bills passed from the House and came over to the Senate.
That's right.
And of those 6 bills, 2 bills became law, and 1 bill was 2 bills were dangerously close to becoming law. The hemp bill being the other bill, that's the only one that we really haven't talked about yet. And basically with that one, you know,
is that 3948?
Yes, okay. That's 3948. But basically with that one, you know, when we legalized hemp, the intent was not to legalize an intoxicating substance. The intent was to legalize an agricultural commodity that could also have this, you know, retail market. And in fact, we should be proud that in Texas, our hemp products are the best, you know, regulated in the whole country, is what I'm told. And so that's really important, really great. But once you create a program, usually for the following 2 to 3 cycles, you go back to the legislature to continue to perfect the agency or to perfect the program, because as it's rolling out, you find issues that have to be addressed. So a major part of this bill was some cleanup. Like let's talk about seedlings and allow those to transport without manifests. Let's allow for longer testing. Let's include hemp seed as a commodity, because as of right now, hemp seed is not included in feed. There was a research component that was really important to Texas A&M AgriLife, I believe, and some of the other ag colleges. And then there was a couple other little things I'm forgetting, but you know, it's this type of like little cleanup, perfecting type of stuff that they were doing.
Right.
But another component was to put a cap on the THC, make it a total THC cap instead of just Delta 9. But so Delta 9 is what is illegal in Texas, not Delta 8, not Delta 10, not Delta 6. Delta 9 THC is what is considered illicit in marijuana. That is what you have to have as under 0.3%.
Right.
And so they were trying to say, let's lump all of the THCs together, and only that can be less than 0.3%. And then they got even ballsy and were like, okay, hold my beer. Let's explicitly make Delta 8 illegal.
So they tried to tack Delta 8 through that hemp bill also.
Yeah.
Wow.
But so what happened was, you know, Tracy King, I think, added in the specific ban, and industry was like, retail industry specifically was like, hold up, no, we don't want that. That's what's keeping our businesses alive through this pandemic.
Absolutely, yeah.
And he was responsive to it, and he removed it. And then it came over to the Senate, and Senator Perry and Senator Springer, who had enacted the original hemp program, because Springer used to be in the House and now he's in the Senate, they were like, if you go back and watch the hearing, ooh, they were salty about like people alleging that they legalized marijuana, and you know, people are getting intoxicated from this, and that was never the purpose. And so they added the Delta 8 ban back with, I think, not quite as strong language, because the other language would have also unintentionally affected CBD and this, that, and see, this is the problem when you get legislators pretending like they're chemists who know
they don't know it enough, right? And then it hurts the whole industry, right? Because it handicaps people in certain ways, and it
also just legalize it so we can test everything and know what's in it and need an ID. I don't understand.
Well, and that's what I was gonna say. Jax, is like, it's kind of it's I mean, it's humorous in a way that they're fighting Delta 8 so hard when it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, right?
Hey,
When
but alcohol
cannabis,
to go, you guys.
yeah, it can, and no licenses for carrying firearms either, right? I mean, it's just a little backward in some ways of thinking.
Well, I mean, there's still a lot of misunderstanding up there. And the fact of the matter is that they didn't intend for people to get intoxicated off of this.
It's a
Delta 8
loophole,
happened to be, smart businesses
right?
trying to feed a market that people want. I mean, people
That's right.
want this market, okay?
That's
People
right.
want these products.
There
And
is
if
an
you don't
appetite.
give them an adequate way to do it, they're going to do what they're going to do. And so, we can talk back and forth about, is Delta 8 good or not? Is Delta 8 even legal or not? Which, there's a strong contingency of people that say it's not, and a strong contingency of people that say that it is. But that aside, prohibition doesn't work. That is what we have learned from the prohibition of marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
And so we could see that, the hemp farmers were like, retailers, quit fucking with our hemp bill.
Right.
We need the hemp seed. We need the this, we need the that. And the retailers were like, no, we will go out of business if this passes. Like, no joke, bro. And so whenever this Perry and Tracy King went to conference committee, they came up with an even better version that in theory, like if it passed, it wouldn't have been too bad, but it would have affected Delta 8. And Perry got the conference report, Perry got the conference report approved in the Senate, but in the House, King was like, no, I'm good.
Wow. So
it died rather than ban the Delta 8.
So those two really important bills, that you talk specifically the hemp one, that really both sides are kind of just waiting to see what happens. Like so they died. So where does Delta 8 stand with all this now? Is it still up in the air or?
Well, so I mean, in theory, people like to think it's up in the air, but this is kind of the same thing that we saw with CBD. And CBD companies were not very happy at us when we talked about the fact that, back before the farm bill was enacted in December of 2018, and then we passed our hemp program in 2019. No, CBD was not legal in all 50 states. Grannies in Corpus Christi were getting arrested for CBD oil at a dispensary because there was THC in it. It may be 0.3%, but that is illegal. And it was a big problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
And businesses were selling things that were in a very gray area. Everybody might not have a problem, but in rural areas especially, there were problems.
Right.
And Delta 8 is kind of in the same realm, especially since the Department of State Health Services put out a memo that they think that it's not technically legal last August. So, I mean, I know there's a lot of businesses selling them, and there's some, good products out there for sure.
Right.
But those businesses need to be very careful, and they're going to have to be vigilant, because if the lieutenant governor and the governor were so badly wanting to ban Delta 8, they might try to do something during the interim about it as well. And I wouldn't be surprised if they did. And so we're going to have to be, especially business owners that this affects, paying attention to it and seeing what happens in other states, because other states have moved to ban the Delta 8. Some people say that because it goes through an isomerization process, that it's not, a direct from the plant byproduct. You can have that conversation all day long, but that's just some of the issues that people have with it. So whether you want to use Delta 8 or not, I think should be up to the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
What the government is there for, in my opinion, is not to make it illegal, but rather to make sure that what they are getting is what the packaging says.
Mm-hmm.
I would rather see Delta 8 have to go through the same regulatory processes our CBD products did, and make sure that there's, clear labeling saying you can become intoxicated, you can sell a UA, and also potentially making it for 21 and up, because it can have an intoxicating effect. I think that that's just common sense and good policy. Now, people might want to have the discussion about 21 versus 18. And in general, I'm like, you 18, you full grown, right? Right?
Right.
No? Oh, no, but not for these things? Okay, got it. Well, in Texas, you have to be 21 for alcohol.
Right.
But something a lot of people don't know is that not this session, but the one before, they changed the smoking age to 21 as well. So 21 is the age that I guess you're really an adult in Texas, and so I think that would be reasonable to have cannabis products that intoxicate fall into that same arena.
Right, right. No, I completely agree. And those are all valid points that you're making. And it's interesting. Like you said, there's some states that have completely banned, Delta 8. I think there's up to 12 right now, that are doing that. But going back to the most basic kind of approach is if you federally legalize, you address a lot more issues and problems than you would by continuing with prohibition and just, further complexing, adding complexity to the entire industry, making it harder for
Well,
people to
and we may
operate.
have a similar situation as to what happened with hemp. Hemp was descheduled at the federal level, turned into an ag commodity, and that happened in December of 2018. And the way that Texas works, there's like this 90-day process that you have to go through to make our controlled substance list fall in line with the federal one. And so by March of 2019, de facto, hemp products are legal, but there's no regulatory, it's the Wild West, right? And so it kind of forced the legislature to move forward. In addition, the legislature was like, oh, wait, so either USDA makes our regulations and we just do what the feds say, or we have to make regulations. Oh, we're going to make regulations, because the federal government, come and take it, whatever, blah, blah.
Right.
And so at the federal level, it's not going to be legalized. What would happen is that they would remove it completely from the schedule. They could change it to a different schedule. Now, if they change it to a different schedule, it would essentially legalize like pharmaceutical level medical cannabis for people. If they just completely deschedule it, then it would make it more where a regulated adult use market would be coming into effect. And so we would be facing that same issue of needing to adjust our controlled substance list to that. And what, are we just going to ignore that and let it be Wild West too? Or are we going to have a special session for regulation and laws, to be determined? But this is something we could have proactively gotten ahead of this session, because, while there is a lot of discussion about what the new administration, Biden and Harris administration, will do and how far they will go, I do anticipate them doing something. And so,
we better be ready, basically, right? Be proactive. Yeah. No, that's a great point. And so another thing I wanted to ask you about is this whole Texas smokable hemp ban.
So a friend of mine is one of the lawyers on that case. And
is that Chelsea?
Oh, Chelsea too, but also Susan Hayes.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay, I just recently
and then
met
I know Matt Zorn as well, and I'm forgetting the other lawyer that's on the case. But yeah, so I know all those people, and I'm friends with Sarah Curver, who's one of the defendants. And defendants? That's not the right word for this type of lawsuit, but you know what I mean.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
She's a 1937 apothecary. So the too long didn't read on that was that when we passed the hemp bill in 2019, they said that you could not manufacture smokable hemp products. When it went through the regulatory process, regulators were like, but also sell it. Also sell it. You can't do that either. And so they tried to ban selling that.
Wow.
So these are like cartridges, pre-rolls. There's discussion as to if loose flower would qualify underneath that, but loose flower you could be purchasing to make edibles or whatever. Like you can't prove someone's going to smoke that.
Right.
But anything that's like marketed clearly as a smoking thing would be banned, and was essentially going to be banned. And so they came together and sued, and there has been several different hearings about that. And currently there is basically a decree that until the judge decides the fate of the lawsuit, that smokable hemp products are continuing to be grandfathered in until the lawsuit is resolved. They are currently just waiting for the judge's decision. That could take 3 months. That could take 3 years. There is quite a backlog because of the pandemic for the judicial system.
Sure.
So right now it's a hold pattern. You may continue to do what you are doing now, but we don't know what you're going to be doing, once this decree comes out. So,
so it's literally just, it's just in holding pattern until the judge makes his decision. I guess both sides have already presented their cases, and
Hmm.
wow, okay. So that could come at any time. Yeah.
Truly. Yeah.
Wow. Well, Jax, one last thing before we wrap up. We at the start of this podcast, you talked about, how you had a tiny break after the 87th legislative session. Now it's all about the regulatory advocacy, redistricting, elections. Like,
Yeah.
so tell us a little bit about like what you're going to be working on, what you're focused on, and what the citizens of Texas can do to help move the needle when it comes to cannabis and hemp reform.
Well, I'm going to work on all the things all the time. No, let's kind of go chronologically, right? So June is typically the off month. My understanding is that because the governor did a line item veto on the budget, that there will be a special session to deal with that, maybe in late summer, early fall. We may decide to do some action to try to get medical cannabis included in that. It all depends on a bunch of different factors. And then there will be the regulatory process will start in earnest in the fall to add the conditions. I wouldn't be surprised if TDA tries to do some more regulations to get some of those fixes they were trying to get through the legislation. So there'll be some different opportunities there. Then redistricting will be happening in like September. They'll have another special session having to do with that. And once redistricting is done, like immediately after that is going to be the filing deadline for candidates who want to run for office in these brand new districts.
Jeez.
Also, let me just say, we still haven't settled the lawsuit from the last time we were redistricting.
Uh-oh.
And we're doing it again, so great.
Right.
That's great.
Just
and then
plow,
that means
plow forward, just move ahead.
it's fine. And so that means once those candidates have filed that, Texas NORML is going to start on our voter guide, and we're going to have a primary edition for the Republican and the Democratic primary. Third parties do their process differently. So they don't use the primary process, they use the convention process. Then we'll be in the conventions because all of the political parties go to the conventions to select delegates for this, that, and the other, and to create their platform, which is really important. Then we'll have the general elections in November. And, if people are not happy with how the Texas legislature just moved forward on these bills, then it's going to be really important that you, if you are Republican, participate in your Republican primary. That is the most important thing that you can do in Texas because of gerrymandering at XYZ. Mm-hmm. And then it's going to be that general election, because redistricting means that everyone is up for re-election. Everyone. Wow. Usually it's all of the representatives, and then the senators alternate years because it's a 4-year cycle. So half of them are up for election one time, half of them another. Well, so next time, lieutenant governor, every senator, every representative, all up for re-election.
And we're not going to forget either. That's to your point.
Texans need to not forget. We put out the voters guide, but we need to have a strong political action committee that works with candidates to make this a real issue on the campaign trail. Right. We work to make it a real issue, but until there's sadly, money going to candidates regarding this, sometimes it can not be their number one priority, which is indicative of our system.
Right, exactly. And when you have a, nationwide, public support polling at close to 96%, I mean, is there any other issue that Americans are, agree on than cannabis reform? So it just seems like it is a bipartisan issue, and the more that we can talk to our policymakers to invoke this change, is really what we need to do. So
so I mean, I would just encourage everyone to go to texasnormal.org. You can click join, become a member. Our organization is 100% funded by our members and small donors. We don't get grant money because we're a C4. We don't get a bunch of money from businesses. It truly is the people of Texas that support and run this organization. And you can also hit subscribe to make sure that you get our email alerts. I'm sure some people are like, oh my God, not another email post-session, just because, session's going on. I'm not going to not tell you the things that are going on. This is breaking news.
Right.
But typically we only send out 1 to 2 emails a month. when it's not session, just to keep you updated on what's going on, and to make sure that you have access to that voter guide and the important primaries and everything that are going to be coming up. So that's how you can definitely get linked in with us. Make sure you follow us on social media. After the session, one of our posts shortly after the governor signed the medical bill was like, frustrated with the Texas ledge. Texas marijuana policy voter guide coming in spring of 2021 or 2022. So it's like, people are frustrated now. And so I want to put that in their minds now, because otherwise they're not going to be thinking about it again for another 9 months. And they might be on to the next, fresh outrage, because there's a lot of fresh outrage out there.
Right. Yeah. Take your pick with these days. Right. But it's so important to keep it top of mind, right? Especially if you're passionate about it. So all the websites, become a member, like Jack said, texasnormal.com. Is that right? Is that the right address?
.org.
.org. texasnormal.org. But hey, Jax, I really appreciate your time. I've really enjoyed talking with you. You're super knowledgeable, fun to talk to. And I feel so caught up with everything that's happened in Texas cannabis and hemp laws now. So as things progress and as you get past all the regulatory advocacy, the elections, I'd love to have you back on periodically to just kind of give, the audience a sense of what's happening in Texas cannabis and hemp. So.
Anytime.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much again. And thank you all for listening. All right.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.